Sam Ladendorf, Performance 5, Intertextuality. The wind penetrated my jacket. I hunched my back, exposing as little as I could to the elements. The road was muddy, the gravel spun away by the numerous cars that traveled my street. I had no gloves. How ironic that the cold burned my hands like scalding water. The mile to Broadway School would be cold. The mist, like smoke, escaped with every breath. I watched my feet avoiding the puddles, hopscotching my way up the road. We didn't talk much. It was as if the weather had frozen words in our mouths. I longed for a heavier coat, cap, and gloves like others had, but they were on a list of things we couldn't afford. A ride would be nice, but others, their heads bowed, walked with us across the tracks that separated the poor from the others, whose parents owned cars, children with parkas, warm mittens, oatmeal in their stomachs. Often envy made me ashamed of where and how I lived, but I told no one for fear it would find its way to my mother's ears, adding guilt to the burden that she already carried. At the Wall by Roy Pullum. The wall stands somber on that windy morning, gales blowing rain into my face. I look at the names, finding a school chum, a poor boy, his fate sealed by the lack of opportunity. Not unlike other 1A card carriers, unable to afford college, to find a doctor who would shield them from the draft. He believed willing to wear the green to fight in a land beyond his knowledge, one day in America, experiencing the good life. The next, landing in a strange world, a land of constant uncertainty. 4 months of waiting patties, 4 months of ambushes, intense firefights. Then the pajama clad phantoms disappeared. A landmine in a clearing, a fatal step, then his life ended. Not the homecoming we wished for him, but we gathered just the same. To hear the minister searching for an answer, then sharing memories, good times with the boy we knew. I took the paper, placing it against the wall and dragging the pencil across the paper, his name rising on the page. Bold letters I've read over and over and over again, remembering each time the futility of Vietnam. When we were little, a bag of flour seemed to be my mother's most thrifty item. Sometimes we just had pancakes, if there was nothing else in the house, or scones, on pension day. On pension day, she would buy the cheapest cut of beef available, cook it, and cut off all the edible meat for one meal. Then she'd use a hand mincer and grind up all the gristly and inedible parts, mix them up with a gravy powder, and make some doughy pastry with the flour. Then that would be cooked into some sort of pie or pastries for the next night's dinner, which was very tasty, actually. Potatoes were also a filling staple. We must have lived on a lot of carbs and not really much else. She would mix a can of tuna fish into a very large batch of mashed potatoes to make some lots of semi-fish cakes, enough for 2 nights. Or mashed potatoes mixed with just about anything left over. Vegetable soup was made with the cut ends and washed peelings. Nothing was ever wasted in our household. It was normal to collect plums or other fruits from trees in public parks around the area, and fruit was freely donated to us by friendly neighbors. I don't remember ever going without something to eat, but as I got older, I realized that my mother had been at times, and I feel guilty about it now, but I just didn't know at the time, of course. We were not as poor as some, but certainly, and to my mother's eternal relief, the second poorest family in the neighborhood. The poorest family had 6 kids and a father in jail. My sweaters, they were knitted from many small pieces of wool unwound from other items that had just too many holes to be patched. I was very proud of my multicolored clothing. My underwear was made from the remnants of bed sheets that had already been turned sides to the middle until they wore through a second time and were finally consigned to a rag bag. Almost everything I wore was handmade or handed down, recycled and patched. We had enough blankets, but Mom always didn't. She placed newspapers on her bed and her overcoat on top of that, then invited the dog to climb on top too and keep her warm. We also had a couple of rooms in the house that required the bucket brigade as a kid every time it rained, and I thought it was a great game, as I did with most things. All in all, I was still a happy kid, and I wouldn't have traded any of my childhood experiences for anything else in the world. And I still love my mom to death.